Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 280, presented by Prize Picks and Game Time Tickets. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we are joined by the esteemed Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, how you doing?
What's going on? How are we doing today?
Ty, it's just one game, but I would say the vibes have improved. It has been a bit of a roller coaster of a week. Jim Montgomery out, fired on Tuesday, Joe Sacco in. I'm not ready to get the duck boats ready after one win over a sub 500 Utah hockey club. I really wish they had an actual name and not just hockey club, but I digress. But looking at the Bruins and how they responded on Thursday night at the Garden, Joe Sacco's first game, what stood out to you about that 1-0 victory?
I think that it was probably the most excitement we've had watching this team, maybe since the Colorado game, in terms of their overall commitment, the overall sort of intensity of the game. Yeah, they only scored one goal, but they were creating. They were playing with pace. They had energy. All the things that we've kind of sat here and said, okay, why don't they have more of that? You saw that on Thursday night, and I think that's important. I think the results, you listen, a 5-0 win in the first game out would have been great. I don't know how realistic it is, though, with this team and this roster construct. So I think they kind of got back to their basics. They got back to what has to be their identity in terms of playing physical, blocking shots, being tight, not letting cheapies. Like, I thought one thing that was super noticeable on Thursday was just like the layers and how smart they were with their sticks. Where the I keep wanting to say the Coyotes, where Utah would try, they try to kind of go, okay, they go low to high and they want to go cross ice here, but they'd have to get through 3 Bruin sticks to get there, and it wasn't happening for them. They were shutting it down. That hasn't been there this year for whatever reason, whether it's coaching, malaise, whatever. That hasn't been there. It was there on Thursday. That's got to be there every game. And I think that's what kind of Joe Sacco is really stressing right now. Details, basics, changing your identity to what you have to be based on your current roster.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost kind of like, I think we've talked about this, where you look at the crossroads this team found itself in, where, under Montgomery, especially early on, they had a lot of scoring depth, a lot of skill. They could kind of roll with that quality over quantity approach where they can control the game, look for those grade A looks in the slot, all that kind of stuff, really get the puck moving, be dynamic with their breakouts. I think you kind of have to adjust with what the personnel is now. And does that maybe mean that the team has to simplify and be kind of more like like the New York Islanders, especially the last couple of years, where like you look at that team, like were they a high flying, super exciting product? Not really, but the results were there. If they play within their system, like they were, as much as they weren't a dynamic team, they didn't lose puck battles, made the smart, simple plays, knew when to kind of fight another day or another shift rather, and really held down their end of the ice and were opportunistic. And I think for the Bruins, you kind of saw a little bit of that. It's not going to be, when Bruce Cassidy took over and after his first practice, you're like, wow, this team is really trying to change things up. I think they're just trying to simplify. And if that means, prioritizing, locking things down around your net, I think Utah only had 2 high danger scoring chances at 5-on-5 play on Thursday. So step in the right direction there. You didn't have, as you said, puck support was there. You didn't have a lot of odd man rushes or situations where you're relying heavily on Korpisalo to bail you out, which was encouraging. And again, he had a great performance as well. But I also think like offensively, you start, especially I think on the power play. But if they get back to maybe what they were a few years ago, where it's shot volume, if there's ever opportunity, put a puck on net, because this team doesn't have the finishing ability to, I think, be selective, right? It's going to be, I think, a lot of when you look at how many big boys they have down low, get pucks on net, get rebounds, get tips, get those greasy goals. And if you stick to that and your offense starts finding a little bit of momentum, as long as you can lean on your goaltending, which is going to be a big part of it, in your defense, you're going to be in a lot of games, which is like, I think for the Bruins, I think you'd rather be in some of these white knuckle 2-1, 3-2 games and simplify and maybe being a little bit more boring, as opposed to swimming against the tide and you lose 7-2 against good teams, right? I think that's the mentality and kind of the baby steps they need to take moving forward.
Yeah, and it's stuff that we've talked about before. I think even going back to the summer, we acknowledge that when you make the moves they made and the investments they made in goal on the back end and signing, the best two-way center available, a guy that you would hope would put up 70 points, but is more known for being a stabilizing presence down the middle than say, a high-flying scorer. Like they were building a team that was designed to win games 2-1, 3-2, all of that. Like they're not going to win a 6-5 shootout with the Dallas Stars. Like they might every now and then, but like it's going to be exceedingly rare for this team to win that kind of game this year. And so yeah, like they got to play more to what they're designed to be. And do we wish that they went out and added a legit scorer? Yes, yeah, 100%. That's why, ironically enough, like Corpusalo, I was saying, like, no, don't do that, don't do that. It's not because of the goalie as much as it's the investment. 3 million behind your 8 million guy is not a great investment, in my opinion. But that's done. That's done and over with. This is what they have. So you need to play to that identity. And I think what you're talking about, what we're talking about, that is that identity. Their identity is not going to be the high flying end to end, you know, the Pittsburgh Penguins of 8 years ago, like I'd love them to be. Like that's not who they are. So they have to win ugly. It's gonna be ugly. It's gonna be a little boring. But I think the biggest thing you can say is that last night was not boring. They had heart, they had energy, they had jump. They haven't had that for long stretches this year. I would say that was the most exciting game in weeks. It was the most connected they looked in weeks as well. We'll see if it's more than just the last gasp, so to speak, of you make the coaching change and you get a slight bump, and then you go back to your old ways. But I think that was telling. If they had given up a goal with 2 minutes left in that game and went to overtime and lost or won in a shootout, you would not feel good today. You'd be like, that is a familiar problem. That is just
Mm-hmm.
it's a different version of what you've dealt with for 20 games now. So I think to react the way they did and to sort of hone in on what a lot of us think their identity has to be, I think that's promising. Now they got to build on it. That's been the hardest part. The hardest part's been
Yeah.
building on it. They've had some good wins, but as we talked about last week, they get their asses kicked the next game out. So now that's where they got to buck the trend. That's the next step for them.
Yeah. And when I say also like looking at the Islanders and like being boring, like I also don't mean like they're going into a Guy Boucher 1-3-1. Holy shit! Like it's going to really drag things out. But even if they're not as maybe dynamic as they were, like I agree. Like you look at this Bruins fandom that has watched weeks of just guys fumbling the pucks like hand grenades, disjointed plays, not shooting the puck, not looking for someone to step up when no one's really doing it. Like as you said, a 1-0 game, but the energy in that building, and I think Bruins fans saw some sort of identity of like you can all right, like maybe that wasn't you're not ripping up the playbook or anything like that, but we saw an identity there that like our team that we support wasn't getting outworked. They were winning puck battles. They were buying in. Even you look on the power play, right? They get their only goal off of an Elias Lindholm tally there, but I think the power play looked remarkably better in terms of just again moving guys around. Martian's back down at the goal line at the net front. I think they had 18 total shots on goal. Granted, Utah took 7 penalties, so that helps you out a little bit. But I think especially the power play, I think you just saw a lot more of that urgency, and something that I think we've talked about that Joe Sacco mentioned is unpredictability. Like you need to get
Mhm.
back to that. That's when that team was so effective on the power play. When you have the personnel you still have there, if you switch things up and are just more frantic, you have the guys that can buy in on those chances down low.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I noticed with the power play, and actually it was sort of what led to the Lindholm goal, but it was a constant throughout, is that they were taking more pucks to the net and relying on sort of the chaos that typically follows if a goalie doesn't swallow it up. Now some goalies, they have great gloves, like they're going to be able to smother it up before that happens. But if you don't, and now it's a 7 body pile up in front of your goal, and that puck is careening outwards to Pasternak or to McAvoy or whoever, like they got the chance to hammer it home, right? And I think I like that strategy more because I think there's less predictability there. I think the biggest thing that when we've harped on the Bruins power play this year, it's that it's predictable. They hold on to pucks for too long, and that allows teams to sort of get set and take away their lanes. And now they have to make a perfect as hell play to avoid it getting, snuffed out. And I think that's been sort of a thing that I didn't notice as much last night. They were not as predictable as they were because they had options. And when you have options, you're going to have a better power play, clearly. And I think that's a step forward. Like, yeah, 1 for 5 or 1 for 6, whatever it was by the night's end. I understand. Not a great number, but I think that they should have had more to show for their power play, to be honest with you. It's just finishing. And that could get better. That's kind of been their bugaboo all year, is finishing has not been there. Don Sweeney alluded to that at his press conference earlier this week. But like I like the mentality of this power play versus what we've seen for the first 20 games, I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the Bruins, the most important thing is just building that momentum going forward on Saturday against a Detroit team that is also really struggling right now. And before we kind of dive into that one and looking at especially the goaltending situation moving forward, which I think is now becoming a legit storyline as this team tries to kind of right the ship and get a little bit of traction. Before we do that, take a quick break and talk a little bit about our good friends over at Prize Picks. The leaves have fallen and the temperature is dropping. And you know what that means, Ty? It means hockey season is in full swing. And there's so many ways for you to get in on the action and win up to 100 times your cash with as little as 4 correct picks on Prize Picks, as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level on the ice, gridiron, court, and much more. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this hockey season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. You can sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. There's really no shortage of ways to participate in Prize Picks, especially during the hockey season. And with the Bruins going for a bit of a reset here with Joe Sacco, Ty, I'm buying into the hype. This week, I'm picking David Pastrnak for more than 4 shots on goal and Nikita Zadorov for more than 5 hits. It's really that easy to make your picks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prize Picks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Ty. Looking ahead now at that game on the road against a struggling Detroit team, chance for the Bruins to build a bit of momentum here. I think the biggest key is going to be who's going to be your guy in net moving forward into that game. Speaking on Friday, Joe Sacco mentions that the Bruins are leaning towards Jeremy Swayman in net for that game. But when asked if the workhorse mentality or the allocation of reps to Swayman moving forward, is that going to stay in place? He said they might start making some adjustments. It might be more of a day-to-day basis in terms of looking at where exactly they're going to allocate those sources moving forward with both Swayman and Korpisalo. Ty, for you, would you go with Swayman on Saturday, or would you ride the hot hand with a guy like Korpisalo?
I go with Swayman on Saturday, and then I go right back to Korpisalo for the next game. I think that the way that they are currently positioned, and I've said this, I think I said this to you last night, I go with a strict rotation because they deserve it. And you can read into that how you want right now, but I think you go with a strict rotation until either Korpisalo's game falls off or Swayman gets his game together. I think that's how you have to kind of look at it. It has to be merit based. And right now, Korpisalo has given you more than Swayman. That said, I do want to give Swayman a chance to get his confidence back. And I think that you look at the schedule right now, the way that they have a lot of games in a pretty condensed window here coming up. I think a rotation is how you do this. I think it's a rotation until proven otherwise. And if we look historically, a rotation is when you've gotten the best out of Swayman. Now, let's say you use the rotation and he gets his game back. Okay, now you can lean on him for 2 and 3 and revisit that. But right now, the 2 and 3s haven't been kind to him, as we've talked about, in the past on this podcast. So I think until one guy drops off, or one guy, rises to the occasion, I think you go with the 50-50 split and you embrace the idea of, well, all right, we got two goalies. We're paying $11 million plus for this tandem. Let's make it work, right? And I think that's how you got to do it in the now, personally, because I don't think you want to totally maroon Swayman. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And put him on a situation where he's been sitting for too long, and then the game he does get, he doesn't win. Okay, now he's back to the bench. Like, that's not a long term plan for success for the Bruins.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to, I think, in the immediate future, just shifting your expectations a little bit. As you said, I don't think it's like, you got to put Korpisalo until he loses. You don't want that, obviously, right? Because also you don't want to
No.
tax the guy that has been one of the few bright spots for your team. But yeah, as you said, if you shift it a little bit instead of, giving most of the reps to Swayman, if it's a strict rotation for the time being, that changes things for Swayman, kind of ramps up the urgency towards him. But also, it's not something where you're, again, as you said, you're banishing him to the gulag in terms of him. He hasn't played well to start the year. He's not up to his standard, but he's well aware of that. This is a guy that, again, as I think there's been a lot of talk about Swayman in terms of, I think, the more big picture criticism of him the last couple of days as it pertains to where the Bruins have struggled this year. I think the Bruins are still very high in terms of his ceiling, what he can be. I don't think there's any buyer's remorse or anything like that. Like, this is a blip that we haven't seen from Swayman because the Bruins have had a situation for 3 years now where you don't have to try out the guy when he's struggling to find his game. Like, you've had the luxury of doing that. This is kind of uncharted territory for him, but it's still a spot where he should be fine. Like, this is still a guy that has shown that he can do that in the past. But for right now, yeah, like, it's not going to be a 70-30 split Korpisalo's way, but where Korpisalo has at least shown that he's been more of a steadying presence than we all probably expected, I go, back and forth for right now and see if that kind of motivates Swayman to kind of find his game while also not overtaxing him, in terms of just easing him back into the swing of things. Because, Korpisalo has been great, but you're going to need both those guys, especially as this team, if they're going to be winning a lot of 1-0, 2-1 games, you need both your goalies to be playing at a high level.
Yeah, and listen, I can tell you, talking to players, that the idea that there's resentment for Jeremy Swayman and they're not playing as hard for him is just complete bullshit. Like, it's listen, it's I understand. We sometimes want drama to be true. We want the spiciness of that or whatever, but you know how hard it would be? This is something that somebody said to me. You know how hard it would be to dog it or to make it look like, we're not trying as hard. You know how hard it would be for that to not be completely obvious. Like, these are guys that are out there skating almost 20 miles an hour. Now you're gonna stop playing. Like, you know how hard that would be to make it look like you're just not. You're actually like shoeless Joe Jackson out there throwing a game. Like, it's not as easy as people think. And I just think that, personally, like, it's a very simple and very boring way of what's going on here. They're playing like garbage in front of both guys, or they were
Yeah.
for 20 games. The only
Yes.
difference is that Korpisalo has made more saves than Swayman. That is the only difference. If you want to go in and look at the charts, the graphs, like the amount of high danger looks they're giving up, they're basically the same. It's just that Korpisalo is making more saves. That is the biggest difference right now. And yeah, so Swayman doesn't have his game in order. I think missing a training camp did hurt him. I think it hurt him in terms of timing, understanding NHL shots. I've said this before, but you could work at BU, you could work, with professional goalie coaches, but nothing is gonna accurately replicate NHL games, NHL quality shots. Like, you need to be in the games, and so I think that has hurt him. Um, I thought the Dallas game was kind of the biggest stinker that he's had. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't to that point, there wasn't a game where I was like, "Oh man, he's been horrible." The Dallas game was that game where I was like, "This is not good enough." And so he's gonna have to get it together. But it's him. It's not the team. It's not lingering resentment. Like, no, it's him. He's got to get that in order. And he said it. He said it after his last loss, where he said, like, I got to pick it up, and I'm gonna beginning right now. And so now he's gonna get that chance to prove it, and then we go from there.
Yeah. I think people watch too much of Maybe like Remember the Titans or something where they're like, all the guys huddle in the locker room. Swayman's the first one. They're like, all right, guys, let's like it's literally controlled chaos out there on the ice. As you said, guys skating 20 miles per hour. Like you can't go in with a game plan as to letting pucks sail through to Swayman in that spot. It's just not how it operates in real life, right? It's a little bit of a theatrical approach, but no, I agree. Like for him, it's all about just finding his own game, and uh, the the numbers aren't very different in terms of like who's playing better in front of him. Like I remember it's like 2 years ago, or maybe it was even three, like during Olmark's first year, where it felt like they were a lot tighter in front of Swayman, but that's also just the unpredictability chaos of hockey where sometimes those things just happen. There's not a team wide conspiracy or anything like that in terms of and again, like you can be like, all right, man, like we should sign the contract, like, those kind of things. That doesn't mean you lay your teammate, the guy you've gone to war with for the last couple of years, out to dry in those spots. Like there's a big gap between those two kinds of things that I think people need to realize in an actual game setting where these guys take a lot of pride in their own games. You also don't want to makes yourself look like shit if you're on the ice
Right.
giving up these goals. Like,
Well, I
what
mean,
you trying
you
to make
want
a
to be
statement there? Like,
you want to be a bad teammate. Okay, have that label follow you around. You could be Mike Hoffman. That's great.
yeah,
Where's he working right now?
mm,
Anywhere? Like that. Like if you have that bad teammate label and you do things out of spite, because of this or that, like you get blacklisted in this league pretty quick, I would say. And so I don't see anybody doing that. And it has been funny asking people about it and just the reaction they're like, what? Like they don't even understand. They're like, what does that even mean? Like they're like,
yeah.
what would that even mean? I'm like, I don't know. That's what the people think, man.
That's what the streets are saying.
Yeah.
Ty, we'll shift now, looking a little bit at the past now with the Bruins' decision to move on from Jim Montgomery. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about our other sponsor, Game Time Tickets. Ty, it's the holiday season. You know what that means? You got Christmas carols. You're maxing out your credit card. You're drinking a lot of eggnog, getting sick, getting a tummy ache. But of course, what else is around football, around holiday season? I messed up the read. It's football. It's football during the holiday season. And if you're a Patriots fan and you want to watch Drake May and New England try to end the year on a high note, you got to go with Game Time Tickets. There's nothing better than posting up with your buddies at Gillette for a Pats game, grilling some burgers, knocking back a few beers, freezing to death, and cheering with the crowd whenever Drake May goes deep. And with football season in full swing, now is your time to take in the action, and Game Time Tickets will get you the best seats at the best prices to get you into Gillette. With killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. Want to catch the Patriots season finale against Josh Allen and the Bills? Game Time Tickets has you covered. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Tickets also has you covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, including event cancellation protection, 24-hour returns guarantee, job loss assurance, and on-time ticket delivery. So what are you waiting for? Take the guesswork out of buying football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Ty, looking back at what has all gone down the last couple of days with the Bruins, um, we haven't really talked, I guess, on this podcast since the Bruins let Jim Montgomery go. Now having a couple of days to digest things, what's just your overall sentiment as to the decision, whether it was time to move on, all that kind of stuff? I know it's a very deep, thorough question there, but what's just your
Yeah.
general sentiment?
I mean, I think that ultimately he took the fall for problems that are probably more roster construct based than anything he was coaching. But I'm also not heartbroken over the sense that I don't think that he was the make or break difference between the Bruins winning and losing a Stanley Cup. I think that you can be a great coach um, while also having some potentially calamitous shortcomings. I feel like that's kind of, I felt like we were always trending towards calamity with him in the playoffs. I mean, Jesus, man, he was a Hampus Lindholm away from being the first coach in pro sports history to blow 3-1 series leads in back-to-back postseasons. I mean, that's just unbelievable, right? You think about that, and I wonder, like, if the Leafs have to play Joseph Woll in Game 7 instead of Ilya Samsonov, like, does he survive? Does he make it out of that game? It's a legit question, right? And I think we talked about it, right? But I think we all felt like this was going to happen at some point this year. Like, whether it was in the playoffs in November, February, like wherever, like we all kind of felt like not sure he makes it through the year, right? And I think, he presses so many buttons so early. He benches Pasternak, rightfully so. It was a bad game for Pasternak. He screaming at Marchand. Marchand's okay with that. Okay, that's fine. Switches the lines 50,000 times over 20 games. Like, okay, what more can you do? He has the press conferences that are getting shorter and shorter, and they're getting more, tense, and you guys figure it out. It's like, okay, we'll try. Like, it just felt like he was out of buttons to press, and the team was getting worse. They were getting worse. I mean, you can stomach losing to Carolina and Dallas. Those are really good teams. But when you're non-competitive against the Columbus Blue Jackets, I don't know how anyone survives that. If you're now under 500, and so it felt like it was time in a weird way.
Yeah, and even going off of that sentiment in terms of it being time, and again, like we've already covered this, I think, on multiple podcasts and both of our websites about the blame game, and obviously the players have a sizable role in that as to where the Bruins are right now. You can also point to the roster construction, all that stuff. We've all established that. But yeah, I do think when you look at just the situation, but the Bruins and Montgomery both found themselves in. Like, going into the year without a contract, like you knew this was going to be a narrative, even if this team was 10-3 to start the year. You're still like, all right, well, you're going to sign Montgomery now. Like, there was still going to be this lingering thing. Even you saw, I think it was Elliot Friedman on his 32 Thoughts was mentioning that, like, from Montgomery's perspective, like he wasn't sure, like looking at the contract negotiations, Friedman noted that Montgomery wasn't sure if he wanted to be here long term. So, like, when you have this kind of weird kind of dynamic here, you have this situation lingering over. You wonder if, like, both sides, or at least one of them, knew going into the year, like, yeah, we'll see where this goes, but first sign of trouble. Like, it kind of felt like that was all but inevitable, especially once you start the year. Regardless of the results, regardless of getting smoked by Florida in that first game where they weren't ready to go, and that kind of set the tone. It just felt like there was some air of inevitability to where the Bruins reached this decision on Tuesday.
Yeah, and going off that real quick, I do want to say that sources confirmed to me that the Bruins made multiple contract offers to Montgomery, and they were all denied, which speaks to Elliot Friedman's point of maybe he wasn't certain. I think internally, my sense is that the Bruins were a little bit worried that he was going to, let's say, full on Barry Trotz a situation where he would roll out the contract year and then he'd leave him high and dry, or he'd want a massive, massive bag that maybe they weren't willing to pay. His contract with the Bruins was for $2 million per year.
Yeah.
That is not exactly top of the market. It was mid tier. I think he wants to be top of the market, and if you're the Bruins, you're like, well, okay. Well, first of all, you've won one playoff round. You had a super team that you helped gag away. We built you this $92 million team with an $82 million cap, and we lost in 7 games. So piss off. We're not doing that. But I think also internally, I think that there is a feeling among the Bruins that Joe Sacco has been close before. They thought he was going to get the job in Anaheim when that opened up a little while ago. He didn't get it. And I think they're okay. Well, if Montgomery's not going to re-sign, or he's going to want a bag that we're not comfortable paying, and the team is bad, why don't we get a look at Joe Sacco before we lose him to, insert team here that hires him in a year or two? Like, I think that was a legit thing for them. And when the team is 8-9-3, it's like, okay, that makes the decision a lot easier. And I think that's where it was. So the Bruins did offer him multiple contracts. They were all turned down. It felt like Montgomery was kind of banking on himself, or betting on himself to a degree, um, which is fine. That's his right. But the team's not playing well enough, and you got a guy that you've always been kind of curious deep down to see if he could be a head coach again. 8, 9, and 3 is not a bad time to pull the chute and see what you got there.
Yeah, and I think you also just look at the way the identity of I think this team and the way they needed to play, and people can also like look at like how the Bruins approach this offseason of getting bigger bodies up front and being like, well, how is Montgomery supposed to succeed with this group when like he's all about moving the puck quickly, going quality over quantity. Shout out to Behind the B for, during the offseason when they went through all these things. Montgomery was in during those like free agent meetings and signed off on the roster. Like it's not like
Yeah,
Jim
he said we're
Montgomery.
better,
It's not like Jim Montgomery was out fishing and then he like checks his phone 3 hours later. He's like, holy, what the shit? Like
which
the
happened with the
coaches.
previous coach, by the way. That
Yes.
there was something like that with the previous coach. He was like, "What am I going to do with that guy?"
Yeah, exactly. So, like, again, going into, again, maybe preconceived narratives or notions as to how these things operate, knowing full well how things went a few off seasons ago. But with Montgomery, like the head coach should have an active role in terms of identifying players, how they want to play. And when you have this group that is probably going to have to be a simple, hard nosed, kind of grinded out kind of system, and how that meshes with what Montgomery wants to do, it kind of felt like it was a rock and a hard place anyway going into it. And when you add in, as you said, like the questions over the recent playoff runs, all those kinds of things, like again, like I feel like this is like pile on Monty. No, like again, a lot of factors are in play here as to why the Bruins are where they are right now. But I do think for the Bruins at some point, it's like, all right, things aren't working. We need a fresh voice in there, but also someone that is more tuned to how they need to play games. And I think, as you said, leading off the show, Sacco, that simplistic, hard nosed effort is kind of, I think, just what you need, at least at the very least right now, just to get your game rolling here. Like, as you said before, like, with right now where you have this lighter part of your schedule, it's all about stacking up wins. And even if your offense isn't clicking, your power play still has a lot to be desired. If you're going to outwork teams and you're going to protect your net front, you're going to be in these games more often than not, and most likely on the right side of the score sheet. So I think that's the biggest thing for the Bruins is identifying probably at some point here, like Montgomery wasn't the guy we needed for this team right now as they're kind of taking that next step forward.
Yeah, and let's just you mentioned the schedule. Let's just look at it real quick here. They had a stretch here where they were playing St. Louis, Columbus, Utah, Detroit, Vancouver, the Islanders, the Penguins, the Canadiens, the Red Wings, the Blackhawks, and then the Flyers before they play the Winnipeg Jets. Look at that segment there. You should go. I don't know how many games that is exactly. Quick math here. 10, 11 games. You should go 8-3. 8-3. I think that's a fair expectation. 7-4, somewhere around there. They started off that stretch 0-1-1. There was really and this is why I think the 20 game mark was interesting, because there was a legit possibility here that the Bruins are going to be a team competing for Atlantic 3 or a wild card spot. Okay, if that's the case, could you really afford to go 5-5 during that stretch? That makes March you have a much more difficult life than maybe you'd like to. And so that's where I think it made a lot of sense for the Bruins in that scope. Yes, I don't want to. I'm with you. I don't want to pile on Jim Montgomery, who, by all accounts, is a great guy. I don't really know. We didn't really know much about him. Like he was kind of guarded. I feel like, which is fine. I don't know if he was guarded as much as like he wasn't Bruce Cassidy, who would tell you everything about his life and then
Yes.
some.
Yes.
But we didn't know him a ton. But yeah, I don't want to pile on him. But like, okay, let's look at it this way. Did you ever have faith that he could outfox Paul Maurice? He was 0 for 2 against him. John Cooper was one of his closest friends, we all know, but
Really good coach.
unbelievable coach.
Yes.
And now Craig Berube in Toronto. Like, it's a hard path, man. That's
Knows how to play the ref post
yes,
game
right.
commentary thing. We've seen it.
It's 5 Stanley Cup champions. If you count all their rings. That he has to outfox every year based on the playoff format. Like I didn't love the odds there. So for me, I'm going, yeah, try something new. I don't know. Like it's still a talent issue at the end of the day as to why they probably will not win a Stanley Cup. this year or the year after. They got to get more talent in here. But I think if you don't have the talent, you have to be cunning. You have to outfox a guy. And I don't think that he was going to outfox these guys that we're talking about right now. That's my own personal feeling on it. The Bruins clearly felt differently. They offered him contracts. He said no, but that kind of speaks to what I'm thinking about. Maybe there's a disconnect here in terms of how good he thinks he is versus how good the Bruins think he is, and maybe that's what accelerated this exit between the parties.
Yep. And here are the Bruins now going into Saturday's game against Detroit. See how they can build off. Hopefully, if they can get a little bit of a momentum here moving forward with Thursday's game.
Yeah, and I think just to touch on this real quick, I also think that with Jim, this isn't a negative. Like, this is not like an indictment against him as a person. I never thought that he understood the culture here. And he's not from here. You know, he's a Quebec guy. And he lived in St. Louis. He was in Denver, obviously, for a while, coaching that program. But like Bruce Cassidy knew Boston. He was from Ottawa, but he grew up a Bruins fan. He rehabbed his image as a coach in the AHL and then came up to the Bruins. Like, he got it, right? And I think that was something that I don't think Montgomery ever got. And doesn't make him a bad coach, doesn't make him a bad guy. It's just Boston is a very insular place, you know, it's very local. And I feel like he never quite connected the way that Bruce could, the way that Claude even could by the end of it, and the way that Sacco naturally can as a Medford native, a guy who's been in the organization for 10 years, knows Boston. I think his brother's a cop. I want to say in Medford, something like that. Like he gets it, right? And I feel like that's something that you can use your advantage. And I never felt that Montgomery ever quite used his advantage when he was head coach of the Bruins.
Yep. We will see what's next for the Bruins going into Saturday's game against Detroit. Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the radio airwaves?
Yeah, you can hear me on 98.5 Sports Hub every Saturday morning, hosting the hockey show. Tomorrow I'm solo, I think. Because they're all in Detroit tomorrow. Literally all of them are in Detroit. Ryan's in Detroit. Beer's in Detroit. Obviously, they're broadcasting the game. And Billy Jaffe, who calls in and sometimes hosts when those guys are out of town, is actually in Detroit as well. He's doing the Raycroft gig that nice. Raycroft when predicted the comeback in St. Louis. So I'm solo dolo tomorrow, 9 to 11. You can hear me there. You can find me online at _Ty Anderson. I'm on the Blue Sky app now as well. That is not underscore. They don't let underscores happen over there. That is Ty-Anderson. So you can find me there as well. How about yourself?
Yes, you can find my stuff over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. We have it covered every step of the way with recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that good stuff. And you can find me on Twitter at Conor Ryan _93. This is episode 280 of Poke the Bear. I'm Conor Ryan. That is Ty Anderson. You fans have a great rest of your week.